Story of the best salesman that you have never heard of, but you know his work. It's in the 1930s. He's a paint salesman in a small town. He took the job. He needed the job. Manager told him it's going to be tough because all of the big buildings in the area had been painted already. The people who had money and the town had painted everything. And the Depression was going on, and the houses that needed the paint couldn't afford the paint. Well, Joe was a paint salesman, and he thought, I'm going in anyway. I'll find a way. He was sitting in the county office building. He was waiting to see the manager, see if any of the administration buildings needed any paint. And as his manager had told him, as he's sitting there in the manager's outer chamber waiting, he's noticing none of these buildings need a drop of my product, not a single drop. But as he was waiting, he heard somebody else in the manager's office, the town manager. He's starting to listen to the conversation. And the guy was explaining that there were, on the curvy roads right side out of town, there had been several head-on accidents. Families were losing loved ones, costing the county a lot of money and lives. Businesses were complaining that some companies now didn't want to deliver goods in the area because the roads were unsafe. They were too tight and they were too curvy, and you couldn't see, and you come around a corner and you'd have a head-on collision. Joe sat there and looked at the perfectly painted walls. Manager finished that conversation, called Joe in and said, Joe, we don't need any paint. And he said, I know you don't, but you have another problem. I heard your conversation. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help but hear you have a problem. And I sat there and I was thinking about it, and I thought, what if you paint a line in the center of the road, and it will tell everybody where the center of the road is so they can stay on their side of the road, especially in those curvy areas. Joe made his first sale. A few months later, because Joe stayed in touch with his clients, he called the manager up. The county manager said head-on collisions had been significantly reduced, but at night, the drivers were so concerned about staying on their side of the road that they were now driving into the ditches, because now they couldn't see at night, especially they couldn't see the edge of the road. They were just worried about that white line in the center of the road. Maybe we could, now maybe we've changed one problem for another. Joe said, well, wait a minute. How about if we paint a line on the edges of the road as well? He made his second sale, and this time it was twice as large as the first sale. Joe became one of the most successful paint salesmen during the Depression. Reason why I tell you this story, Joe didn't sit around and hope. Joe didn't sit around and whine about, oh my gosh, there's no business. He didn't say that everybody had already painted. He didn't blame the people who didn't have money. He didn't blame the people who did have money. He didn't tell the people on the streets with the houses that were all beat up that they couldn't afford it. Maybe they should take the money from the rich people and soak the rich so they had money to buy his product. He didn't do any of that. And he didn't just hope for a better tomorrow. He reached down inside of himself, and he found what was unique in him. He knew what his job was, and he did the best, not to sell the paint any way, shape, or form, but to make life better for others, to find a way to solve somebody else's problem. Hope for a better tomorrow, but do the work, your absolute best work, and watch what happens.